This is CBC Vancouver News.
They don't seem to be moving on wages and pensions, so there really is no point.
After days of negotiations to no avail, transit workers in the Fraser Valley say an indefinite strike will go ahead Monday.
We're not going to be backing down until we hear the official word from the city and the mayor that this project is cancelled altogether.
And after weeks of public outcries from Burnaby residents, a decision to remove parkland for a new green waste facility may not go ahead after all.
2 bottles of water, a single donut. One of our neighbors here got a bowl of gravy.
A slew of unsolicited Uber Eats food orders has residents in New Westminster puzzled. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Janella Hamilton. Leanne is away tonight. We begin in Fraser Valley, where more than 200 transit workers are set to walk off the job Monday, forcing bus riders to find an alternative. First Transit workers say an indefinite strike is planned as QP 561 and their employer have not been able to reach a deal.
Our line of communication is open. If the employer wants to meet with us, we're willing to meet. But they don't seem to be moving on wages and pensions, so there really is no point.
All transit services in the eastern Fraser Valley will come to a halt, except Handy Dart, which will continue to operate for essential services. This will be the third strike for the QP union after 3 days of negotiations failed to bring a new collective agreement. The union is pushing for better wages and working conditions and a pension. Earlier this evening, Vancouver Fire Rescue Services responded to a tent fire in the downtown east side. The fire started outside but quickly spread to a building nearby. Several other tents caught on fire. In the post on social media, Fire Chief Karen Fry says there were multiple propane tanks found on site. The fire spread to the entranceway of the Imperial on Main Street, a vacant concert venue. No injuries were reported. The cause of the fire is under investigation. And another fire on Vancouver's downtown east side resulted in one person being rescued.
I was just sitting on the deck. I was having my morning coffee and cigarette and such, and I heard the smoke alarm, and I couldn't figure out where it was coming from. And then when I looked up, then of course I seen the smoke coming from the top window, and then there was a male inside yelling "fire, fire, fire." So I woke my wife up and told her the building was on fire, and so we got out.
Fire officials say the SRO on Gore Avenue had no sprinklers but did have working smoke alarms. Assistant Fire Chief Jarrett Gray says about 40 firefighters responded to the call just after 7 o'clock this morning. One suite was destroyed and one person was taken to hospital to be treated for smoke inhalation. No other injuries were reported. Officials say a few neighbors will also be displaced due to residual damage in their units. The cause of the fire is still unknown. Burnaby residents are once again voicing their opposition to the construction of an organic waste facility at Fraser Foreshore Park. City Council has approved next steps for the $180 million project, but as Eva Senge reports, after weeks of public outcries from those who use the park, that decision may be reversed.
Seymour Park! Seymour Park! Seymour Park!
These residents don't want their green space used for green waste. They say the city of Burnaby is moving forward with plans to build a green recycling and organics facility in Fraser Foreshore Park, a protected ecosystem, without public approval. And they're not backing down.
This is not acceptable. This is a green space. There is lots of values in terms of ecosystem. There's lots of values in terms of wildlife and also fish habitat.
They've made their opposition loud and clear for weeks, but city staff says building a compost facility in the park would save the city money and eliminate pollution from truck transport. Earlier this week, Burnaby Mayor Mike Hurley told CBC News the decision to build the facility on 21 acres of the park was not made lightly.
To find this size of property anywhere in Burnaby is just about impossible. And, we have done an exhaustive search of other opportunities where we might be able to do this.
Because the land is dedicated parkland, the city needs approval from residents to allow the compost facility to go ahead. Council is using an alternative approval process that would require 16,000 votes against the project to stop it.
We're not going to be backing down until we hear the official word from the city and the mayor that this project is cancelled altogether.
With mounting public backlash, Hurley is calling for a special council meeting Monday, stating council has heard loud and clear that while this may be the right project, it is not the right location. Monday's meeting will be open to the public. Critics of the compost facility hope councillors will cancel the alternative approval process and collaborate on other possible locations. Eva Yuguen-Senge, CBC News, Vancouver.
Advocates for the unhoused say a plan to help vulnerable people in Prince George could also work in other parts of the province. Last week, the northern BC city voted to create a centralized homeless encampment, but with it comes plenty of concerns. Michael Edward Nardacchione says having a legal encampment where people experiencing homelessness can stay day or night could provide a sense of stability and security.
Everyone watches out after everyone else, and there is fewer problems than what we're seeing today, where we see finding dead people downtown, people who have overdosed without having any supervision.
A similar plan is being proposed by the city of Prince George. If it passes, overnight sheltering would be allowed at the Lower Patricia encampment called Moccasin Flats by those who use it. Anyone found sheltering elsewhere in the city would be directed to the camp or another shelter.
I think it's a great idea. The idea should also come, I think, to Vancouver here.
Vancouver advocate Fiona York says it could be a good idea if done respectfully and with input from those who have been homeless. She says basic amenities like washrooms and running water are also key, but has concerns about such a centralized plan.
People like to seek out areas that are close to their services and their networks, their family, their friends, their clinic, their health support.
The city of Salmon Arm has set aside property as an overnight campsite, and later this week the town of Smithers will be voting on the idea of a centralized encampment, a temporary solution until more shelter spaces or social housing is available.
Since the 70s, the funding has been cut back so drastically. That's why we see this sort of crisis that we're in right now.
Premier David Eby tells CBC News getting people into dignified housing is a top priority, but labor and supply chain challenges have slowed construction. York says encampments ought to be monitored by peer support and mental health workers, not police, as is being proposed in Prince George.
I think that is absolutely the wrong model and very wrong-headed. In BC in 2022, there was a 25% increase in police-involved shootings and deaths.
Shelley Micheli has been living isolated in this tent for about 5 months. While a more permanent home would be ideal, she also worries about having people with different struggles together in one space.
Well, we need some separation between those that are into hard drugs and those that are not.
In a statement, the City of Vancouver and the Parks Board says they do not support encampments and is prioritizing work to create more supportive social housing and emergency shelter spaces. At 63, Micheli says she just wants to live life with dignity. There are concerns for household pets after 8 skunks were found dead with avian flu in Metro Vancouver. Officials say it's the first time such a cluster of mammals have been killed by the virus.
The good news is that actually for cats and dogs, the risk of highly pathogenic avian influenza is actually quite low. So, we do want you to keep exercising your dogs and going out. Having said that, if there is an area where there's like a water source that birds are drinking from, or, some birds eat on the ground that they're eating, then, it's best to keep your pet away from something like that.
The BC Centre for Disease Control is advising people to make sure eggs and poultry dishes are well cooked and to boil untreated water from areas where wild birds gather. Any dead birds should be reported to the province's hotline. Since last year, more than 3.6 million birds have been infected with avian flu in BC. Residents in New Westminster's Victoria Hill neighborhood are frustrated by a slew of unsolicited Uber Eats food orders. They say dozens, if not hundreds of packages have been piling up on their doorsteps, and they have no idea who ordered them. Yasmin Gandam reports.
2 bottles of water, a single donut. One of our neighbors here got a bowl of gravy.
In just a week, one resident has received more than 30 deliveries of bizarre food items.
Either we weren't home and they were just kind of like left on our patio, or like multiple delivery drivers at the same time, like carrying bags, were ringing our doorbell and kind of saying, "Here's your delivery." And I was like, we didn't order any of it.
She's trying to do what she can to stop the orders, but they just keep piling up. All of it with someone else's name written on the receipt.
And I was like, what is the address to this stuff? And they were showing kind of phone numbers, and the phone numbers were like 505-555-5555. So it kind of didn't make any sense. But this is where they were told to drop. And so, they were able to take it away, but they had no idea what was happening because they're just fulfilling their duties as drivers.
As it turns out, many people in the neighborhood have been inconvenienced.
Sort of in our group complex chat, everybody was like, is this happening to you? Is this happening to you? And we started finding out through Facebook groups and stuff that it was happening in other spots in Victoria Hill as well.
Hughes has tried calling Uber Eats for answers and was unable to speak to anyone at the food delivery service. In a statement to CBC, the company says they have banned accounts related to the orders and will take action if the unsolicited orders continue. She also contacted the police, who told her there's not much they can do.
It could have been a concern for if someone was checking to see if there were residents home, maybe for a potential break-in, or if there was some like odd kind of people in the neighborhood. Or if it was kind of a credit card scam. So to be sure to check my Uber Eats account, make sure my credit cards were fine.
Residents say the worst was on Thursday.
But somebody sent me a photo of their front porch where animals had clearly gotten into the McDonald's bag and the food was spread everywhere. So
since then, they haven't received any unsolicited orders. It's a strange phenomenon, but not so unique. This week, residents of a Los Angeles neighborhood also complained after being inundated with orders. The LA Times reports Uber Eats has taken action against the accounts responsible. As for these neighbors, they're hoping the free fast food deliveries dry up. Yasmin Gandam, CBC News, New Westminster.
Advocates are calling for policy changes to a WorkSafe BC program that gives funding to injured people who hire their own caregivers. As it stands right now, the program does not allow patients to hire an immediate family member or spouse, but as Michelle Gomez reports, advocates say the policy is outdated.
Brooke Paget takes pride in caring for her husband full-time. He's been paralyzed from the neck down since a workplace injury in 2014 and requires 24/7 care. But he was not allowed to use his funding from WorkSafe to pay her because they are married.
I can't even step out for longer than an hour. I think I've taken one night off since he was injured.
The couple initially tried to hire outside care but had several bad experiences. After they fought for years for an exemption, a workplace tribunal eventually ruled in 2021 that he should be able to hire his wife. But 2 years later, the Vancouver couple is still fighting WorkSafe to get full compensation, and they wonder why the program still has not changed their policy for everyone.
I'm devoted to his care. I consider that a full-time job. I just want the rights and the benefits like everybody else, right? Because I'm doing all of this work and I feel so taken advantage of.
WorkSafe says the policy is in place to protect those receiving care. They say there have been cases where immediate family members failed to provide quality care and instances of misappropriation of funds. But caregiving expert Jennifer Baumbush says this policy is outdated and should be changed, especially amidst a shortage of caregivers.
The healthcare system is benefiting from millions, if not billions of dollars in care that is being provided unpaid by family members. Now that we are sort of had the experience of what has happened with the home support workforce over the course of the pandemic, we really need to rethink some of these quite dated policies and programs in our province.
Paget has not been able to work a full-time job since 2014 due to her caregiving duties. She says they live paycheck to paycheck.
They want disabled couples to live in extreme poverty. and they want to save money by doing it.
WorkSafe did not respond to specific questions about changing the policy. Michelle Gomez, CBC News, Vancouver.
The Junior All-Native Basketball Tournament, also known as JANT, kicked off in Nanaimo today. Our Claire Palmer was there learning more about the tournament hosted by the Snuneymuxw First Nation.
The energy is electric as basketball teams from across BC get ready to hit the court in a celebration of Indigenous youth and sport. A cultural performance opened the tournament Sunday night. Come Monday, these young athletes will be trading in the regalia for jerseys, each team striving to capture gold at JANT. Coach Daphne Robinson remembers when she used to compete at the tournament as a young athlete. She describes the event as one big potlatch.
Oh, it was something else. It's the pride of playing for your nation. Yeah, it's exciting. The adrenaline's it's just out of this world. You know, that goes through you during the whole tournament.
Local organizations jumping at the chance to shine a spotlight on Indigenous culture through sport. It means the world to these young competitors. Caitlin McMahon-White says her experience with the tournament has been life-changing.
JANT really saved my life. I think being around so many other youth who were very passionate about the same thing I was just allowed me to keep going forward. And I think if I didn't have that opportunity, I wouldn't be standing here today with you.
A week of games is set to begin on Monday. The competition includes girls and boys all under the age of 17. The Nanaimo Native Sons are hoping to reclaim the magic of 2015 and win once again on home soil.
I think JANT is about community, belonging, connection, family, and it's remarkable.
The week-long event will feature a market with Indigenous art and foods, with the championship games and awards wrapping up on Friday. Claire Palmer, CBC News, Nanaimo.
A move to calm fears of a global banking crisis, Switzerland's biggest bank is buying out one of its troubled rivals. That story is next. A major financial move in Switzerland tonight aimed at calming fears of a global banking crisis. Susanna De Silva has the latest.
Just hours before global markets were set to reopen, a late-night news conference to announce a multi-billion-dollar deal.
The bankruptcy of a global systematically important bank would have caused irreparable economic turmoil in Switzerland and throughout the world.
After a weekend of emergency talks, the Swiss government revealed the country's largest bank, UBS, is set to take over the second largest Credit Suisse.
In this difficult situation, the takeover of Credit Suisse by UBS is the best solution for restoring the confidence that has been lacking in financial markets recently.
The bank has been plagued by scandal in recent years, from bad investments to failing to prevent money laundering. One of the final straws was a self-described weakness in its financial reporting.
What they're worried about now is regaining and restoring the integrity and the reputation of Switzerland, the Swiss banking industry.
This comes after the stunning collapse of two major U.S. banks rattled investors and customers. While experts say the factors in the U.S. and Swiss banks are different, they share a common looming threat: panic.
And they start to think, well, wait a minute, I've got money at a bank down the street that's maybe dealing with that bank that's in trouble. And that becomes the foundation of the panic.
And that fear could lead to consequences here in Canada.
The big worry here in Canada is not the banks themselves. We do have a relatively safe, well-regulated banking system here in Canada. But if this sort of sense of fear does percolate across global markets and across borders, then we are looking at a slowdown in Canada.
What that could look like isn't clear, but experts are urging caution during this volatile time.
We should probably be looking to protect ourselves by avoiding unnecessary spending, by keeping those debt levels as low as possible, and ensuring that we have cash on hand in case of uncertainties in the economy.
As we await the first indication of whether the Swiss deal leads to more confidence or concern. Susanna De Silva, CBC News, Vancouver.
The cost of the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion continues to balloon. The price tag is now estimated at just shy of $31 billion. The expansion will essentially twin the existing pipeline that runs from Alberta to the BC coast, nearly tripling capacity. And as Kyle Bax tells us, this project could be the last big new oil pipeline in Canada.
From the storage yards and into the ditches, much of the pipe is now laid. As the Trans Mountain expansion project nears the finish line, some say it's the end of an era.
I think we'll be good. I suspect, and the industry is always finding new ways of doing things, and I don't think we're going to see another large-scale liquid pipeline coming forward.
Trans Mountain is necessary, industry experts say, as space is filling up on existing pipelines. But beyond this project, there's less need for more pipes. That's because oil production growth in Western Canada is slowing.
Kinder Morgan's got to go!
Pipeline politics have plagued the country for more than a decade, with Trans Mountain often squarely in the spotlight.
The TMX is very polarizing for the fact that, one, protection of the environment, the pipeline integrity, it's always in question.
Last week, the price tag for the project was updated to more than $30 billion, quadruple the original cost. First proposed more than a decade ago, construction is expected to finally wrap up by year's end.
There's need and ability to build.
This expert says the problems with Trans Mountain are sure to discourage any pipeline developer from pitching another big oil project.
A little bit concerned and definitely hesitate before they move forward on a long-distance pipeline, even if there was a deluge of oil to come.
The focus will soon shift to ownership. For a few years, some Indigenous groups have been preparing to make bids. The federal government has said it will sell the pipeline, but only after it's certain the project will be completed. Kyle Bax, CBC News, Calgary.
Here we have a live shot of Georgia Street. When we come back, the City of Vancouver's Archives is celebrating a milestone.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
On April 11th, join CBC Vancouver's Johanna Wagstaff at the Alumni UBC webinar with Dr. Samard and her work on the Mother Tree Project. The focus is to connect First Nations, forestry companies, government, and academics to create resilient forests and stewards of the land. Register at alumni.ubc.ca. And on April 15th, join CBC at the Vancouver Vaisakhi Festival, a Sikh celebration of the coming of a new year.
The City of Vancouver Archives will be marking its 90th birthday this June. To celebrate the milestone, the Archives has launched a social media campaign sharing 90 photos from the vast collection. The Archives' mandate is to acquire and preserve city records, but it also stores memorabilia from families, sports groups, businesses, and cultural organizations. That is your late news for this Sunday. Thank you so much for watching. For news at any hour, you can always head to our website, cbc.ca/bc. Have a great night.